Imagine if the first advanced civilization on Earth wasn't us, not aliens, not dinosaurs, but something intelligent, capable of technology, industry, and cities, millions of years before humans appeared. The idea sounds like pure science fiction, until you realize how little of Earth's ancient history we've actually explored. If a civilization rose and fell tens of millions of years ago, the question is not, could we find them? But rather, would anything at all be left to find? In this investigation, we'll look at the science, the mysteries, and the clues buried deep in the planet itself, clues that might prove we were not the first to walk this path. And to understand how a civilization could vanish so completely, we have to start with the clock that governs everything: geological time. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Modern humans, approximately 300,000 years. Industrial civilization, barely 300 years. If we scale Earth's history to a 24-hour clock, humans appear in the last second before midnight. The rest of the clock is filled with entire worlds we've never seen. Civilizations could have come and gone during those other hours, and their traces would now be hidden under miles of rock, sediment, or ocean. Consider this. New York City, if abandoned, would be reduced to dust in just a few thousand years. After 1,000,000 years, almost nothing recognizable would remain. Multiply that by 100 million years, and even steel and concrete are gone. And yet, the Earth does preserve some things, if you know where to look. That's where scientists begin the search. Introducing the Silurian hypothesis, the scientific framework for detecting ancient industrial civilizations. What could survive millions of years? Certain artificial isotopes in the rock record. Unnatural mineral formations from high-heat industrial processes. Sudden spikes in atmospheric CO or pollutants, even in ancient layers. Example case. In 2018, geologists found an unusual layer of sediments dating back 56 million years during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, a sudden global warming event, officially attributed to volcanic activity. But the pattern eerily resembles the industrial CO spike we're causing today. Could this have been caused by something or someone other than volcanoes? In the next section, we'll dig into the anomalies, the strange finds that don't quite fit into our current history books. If an ancient industrial civilization had existed, what would we see today? Maybe things that don't belong where we find them. Across the world, scientists have stumbled upon anomalies, patterns in the Earth's layers that hint at sudden, unexplained changes. One example is the Fermi paradox of geology. In billions of years of sediment, we find very few sudden changes that match industrial fingerprint, except for a handful of suspicious spikes. The mystery sphere anomalies in South Africa, metallic spheres over 2 billion years old, with grooves that appear artificially precise. Geologists argue natural formation, but metallurgists point to odd uniformity. Ancient glassy layers called tektites, usually linked to meteor impacts, but some appear without an obvious crater. Could high-energy human-like industry have created them? Compare Rome's ruins after approximately 1,500 years versus a hypothetical city after 10 million years. Explain how erosion, subduction zones, and ocean rise erase the past. The city of Pavlopetri, Greece, submerged for 5,000 years, still shows roads and buildings. But it's already heavily degraded. At 1,000,000 years old, even the seafloor would likely bury it entirely. So if the Earth is such an efficient eraser, where could a trace survive? That takes us to one of the strangest ideas in archaeology. The only places that could preserve evidence for tens of millions of years are the rare time capsules of our planet, deep seabed sediments, frozen ice layers, and certain cave systems. Drilling into these layers, scientists have found microplastics buried in sediments just 50 years old. Imagine finding that same pattern 50 million years from now. And when we do search those zones, we sometimes find things we can't quite explain. define UPARTs, artifacts that appear too advanced for their time. Clarify that most are hoaxes or misinterpretations, but a few remain unresolved. The Antikythera mechanism, not proof of a lost civilization, but a reminder that technology can vanish and be forgotten for centuries. The 300-million-year-old steel screw embedded in rock, found in Russia, heavily debated but intriguing. Whether these are the remains of earlier humans or something entirely different, they force us to ask a question mainstream history doesn't want to touch, because if we do find undeniable evidence, it won't just rewrite history. It will change our place in the universe. When we think of the story of life on Earth, we often imagine a single upward line, a steady climb from simple bacteria to plants, animals, and finally us. But the fossil record tells a much stranger, more chaotic story. Life doesn't move in a straight line. It surges forward, collapses entirely, and then starts again. Over and over. Scientists call these moments mass extinctions, and they've happened at least 5 major times in Earth's history, with dozens of smaller ones in between. Each one wipes the slate clean, erasing up to 90% of all living species. And each time, the survivors, whatever they are, repopulate the planet in new and unexpected forms. Now here is the unsettling thought. What if one of those vanished worlds had its own intelligence? Its own builders, thinkers, maybe even explorers? If they did, the very events that destroyed them could have shredded nearly every trace they ever existed. The first major extinction we know of, the Ordovician-Silurian event, happened roughly 443 million years ago. Back then, life was mostly in the oceans. Then came the Devonian extinction, the Permian-Triassic extinction, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction, and finally the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction, the one that ended the dinosaurs about 66 million years ago. These aren't random disasters. In some cases, they follow a pattern. Changes in climate, fluctuations in sea levels, even possible asteroid impacts. Some researchers have proposed that mass extinctions could be part of a repeating planetary cycle, an almost rhythmic reset button baked into Earth's system. If that's true, intelligence could have emerged before, and then been wiped out with the same cold efficiency that erased the dinosaurs. The fossil record isn't a complete photo album of Earth's past. It's more like a collection of random snapshots, most of them damaged, many of them missing altogether. Fossils form under very specific conditions, and even when they do, geological processes eventually destroy them. Sedimentary rock, where fossils are found, is constantly recycled by plate tectonics. In fact, less than 1% of all species that have ever lived are represented in the fossil record at all. That means there is enormous room for things to have happened, entire evolutionary dramas that we simply have no record of. It's in those blank spaces that the mind starts to wander. Could there have been an intelligent species, tool makers, builders, in one of those lost ages? The Silurian hypothesis, proposed by NASA's Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank, suggests we could detect an ancient industrial civilization by looking for unusual patterns in the geological and fossil records. If an intelligent species had burned fossil fuels, for instance, the carbon isotopes in the rocks would shift in a way that could last millions of years. Now consider the end Permian extinction, sometimes called the Great Dying. It happened 252 million years ago and wiped out over 90% of all marine species and 70% of land species. The official explanation is massive volcanic activity in what is now Siberia, releasing enormous amounts of CO. But here is where it gets eerie. Some of the chemical signatures in the rock, sudden spikes in carbon and rare metals, look disturbingly like the industrial fingerprints we produce today. Mainstream science says it's all volcanism. But if you were looking for the calling card of a vanished industrial civilization, this is exactly what you'd expect to find. Paleontologists sometimes find evidence of so-called ghost lineages, species that seem to appear suddenly in the fossil record, without clear ancestors. One example is the rapid diversification of mammals after the dinosaurs disappeared. From a purely evolutionary standpoint, this can happen due to environmental opportunities. But ghost lineages can also hint at missing history, gaps where the fossil record failed us. Could some of those gaps hide a rise and fall of intelligence that we haven't detected? If an intelligent species reached technological civilization in the deep past, why would it vanish completely? We can think of several scenarios. Global catastrophe. Asteroid impacts or supervolcanoes can sterilize large swaths of the planet almost instantly. Self-destruction, resource exhaustion, war, or runaway climate change could collapse a civilization from within. Gradual decline. Environmental shifts could slowly reduce population and technology over thousands of years until only scattered. Non-technological communities remained, eventually blending back into the natural world. In each case, physical traces would be erased on a geological timescale. This is where science steps in. Rocks can hold a kind of memory, not of buildings or tools, but of chemistry. If an industrial civilization used metals extensively, we might find unusual concentrations of refined elements like aluminum or rare earth metals in ancient sediments. If they created plastics, tiny particles could persist as microplastics in the rock layers, just as ours will. Researchers today are drilling deep into Antarctic ice and ancient seabeds looking for such anomalies. Most of what they find is explainable by natural processes, but the search is still young. Every so often, something strange surfaces, like the 300-million-year-old imprint in a coal seam in Russia that some believe resembles a gear mechanism, or the Cretaceous-era rock formations in France that contain perfectly spherical metallic inclusions with no obvious geological cause. Most of these turn out to have plausible natural explanations. But each one sparks the same question: what if we stumbled onto the one piece of evidence that wasn't natural? Would we even recognize it for what it is? There is a psychological hurdle here. Scientists are trained to interpret evidence within the framework of known history. If a geologist found a 200-million-year-old artifact, their first instinct would be to assume contamination, misdating, or a natural process. That means even if evidence existed, it could have been found and dismissed. Mass extinctions aren't just ancient history. They re-part of Earth's ongoing reality. Many scientists believe we're living through the sixth mass extinction right now, driven by human activity. If intelligent life did rise before us, their fate might hold lessons or warnings for us. Did they vanish because of natural catastrophe? Or because they engineered their own end? And this brings us to one of the most haunting ideas in all of science, one that links the possibility of past civilizations to the question of our own future. It's called the Great Filter. And if it's real, it might already be waiting for us. For decades, scientists have been asking a question so big, so unsettling, that it feels almost impossible to answer. If the universe is filled with billions of planets, many of them older than Earth, then where is everyone? This is the Fermi paradox. Statistically, there should be countless civilizations out there, some more advanced than us, perhaps millions of years ahead. And yet the skies are silent. One of the most chilling explanations for this silence is the idea of the Great Filter, a barrier that prevents civilizations from advancing beyond a certain point. Some never make it past primitive life. Others might develop intelligence and then destroy themselves before they can explore the stars. If the Great Filter is real, then it might have already operated here on Earth, perhaps more than once. Maybe ancient civilizations did arise long before us, climbing the ladder of progress only to hit that same invisible wall. The filter could be natural: asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, gamma-ray bursts. Or it could be self-inflicted: environmental collapse, war, or runaway technology. If that's the case, then we might be living in one of the few windows in history where it is even possible to reach the heights we are enjoying now before we, too, face our own filter. Astrobiologist David Grinspoon once described the galaxy as possibly being a graveyard of civilizations, worlds where intelligent life once thrived, but left no lasting sign. Imagine billions of planets, each with its own history of rise and fall. If a civilization only survives a few thousand years after becoming technological, the odds of two advanced civilizations existing in the same time period and being close enough to communicate become extremely small. In that view, it is not that the universe has always been silent. It's that we re-listening at the wrong moment. When scientists list potential filters, it's sobering to see how many match our current trajectory. Resource exhaustion, overuse of vital resources leading to collapse. Climate change, heating or cooling beyond a civilization's capacity to adapt. Nuclear war, rapid self-destruction through weapons of mass destruction. Uncontrolled AI technologies, outpacing human ability to manage them. Each of these could, on its own, be enough to end a civilization before it spreads beyond its home planet. Carl Sagan famously called Earth a pale blue dot, a fragile oasis in the vast darkness. From space, our world looks peaceful, but history and the geological record tell a more turbulent story. If civilizations before us hit the Great Filter, it may have happened suddenly at their peak. We might imagine them reaching for the stars, only to vanish just as they were about to succeed. Lessons from possible ancient civilizations. Let's connect this back to our main question. If intelligent life existed on Earth before us, how would the Great Filter apply to them? Perhaps they reached a point of industrialization and triggered massive environmental changes, ones they couldn't survive. This could explain certain ancient warming events in the fossil record, like the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. If so, then they didn't fail because intelligence is rare. They failed because intelligence is dangerous to itself. There's another way the filter could work, not as a physical disaster, but as a psychological one. Civilizations might lose the will to explore or expand. Internal conflicts, philosophical shifts, or cultural collapses could keep them trapped on their home worlds until they fade away. We often imagine alien civilizations as hyperlogical and driven to explore. But what if they're just as flawed, divided, and distracted as we are? Look at us. In just the last century, we've gone from horse-drawn carts to computers, spaceflight, and genetic engineering. But at the same time, we've created weapons that could wipe out our species in hours, and environmental damage that could take millions of years to undo. We've reached a technological adolescence, a period where our capabilities outstrip our wisdom. This may be the most dangerous stage for any civilization. If the Great Filter exists, this is when it claims most victims. There is a more optimistic take. Maybe the reason the universe seems empty is that we've already survived the hardest part. Perhaps the Great Filter is behind us. Life itself is the hard step, or intelligence is rare, and we've already cleared it. In that case, the silence of the cosmos is not a warning, but a sign that we're extraordinary. If this is true, then we might be among the first or the only civilizations in the galaxy to reach this stage. That would make our survival and our stewardship of Earth even more important. The Great Filter concept forces us to think about our current choices in cosmic terms. If we're in front of the filter, our actions in the coming centuries will determine whether humanity becomes a multi-planet species, or just another geological curiosity, a blip in Earth's long history. If we're past the filter, then the universe is waiting for us, but it is also depending on us to carry the torch of life forward. If ancient civilizations existed here and were wiped out, it means the filter can operate on a single planet multiple times. That's both sobering and motivating. It would mean we are not the first to face it, but we might be the first to survive it. And survival may require us to understand not just the dangers of our future, but the forgotten lessons of our past. Which leads us to the next piece of the puzzle. If an ancient civilization really did rise before us, and it was destroyed, could any trace of its technology still exist today, hidden in places we've barely begun to explore? If an advanced civilization rose before humanity, and the Earth's slow violence buried every city, monument, and artifact they ever made, then where could the last traces still be hiding? The easy answer is nowhere. Over tens of millions of years, almost everything built would be destroyed. But almost isn't the same as everything. There are places on Earth, strange hidden environments, that act as natural vaults. Places where the conditions could protect fragments of technology for incomprehensible spans of time. The deep ocean, Earth's final archive. Most of our planet's surface, about 71%, is covered by ocean. And beneath those waters lies the deep seabed, a world without sunlight, with stable temperatures, and with layers of fine sediment that settle like a protective blanket. In the deepest trenches, like the Mariana Trench, pressures are so extreme that almost nothing disturbs the bottom sediments. If a ship, machine, or even a structure were somehow deposited there, it might survive longer than anything on land. Case study: the Antikythera shipwreck in 1901. Divers found the remains of a 2,000-year-old Greek shipwreck off the coast of Antikythera. The wood had decayed, but the bronze gears of the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient analog computer, survived. If such delicate gearwork could survive 2,000 years under the sea, could something far older survive in the right deep-sea conditions? We've mapped only a tiny fraction of the ocean floor. Entire civilizations could have left debris in these depths, and we might never find it unless we look directly. Subterranean vaults, some of the most durable human structures, are underground. Mines, tunnels, and deep cave systems can remain intact for astonishing lengths of time, shielded from weather, erosion, and even many geological events. If an ancient civilization had the engineering ability to carve into stable bedrock, those chambers could survive millions of years, at least until tectonic activity reshaped the region. Modern parallel: the Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway is designed to survive for thousands of years. Carved into permafrost, it's built to withstand war, climate change, and geological shifts. Now imagine a civilization building something like that, but 10 miles underground, in the most geologically stable regions of the planet. Fossilized technology. The idea of fossilized technology sounds strange, but it's possible. In rare cases, minerals can slowly replace the materials of an object, preserving its shape for millions of years. This process, called permineralization, is how some fossils form. While most metals would corrode away, certain alloys or ceramics could leave behind a mineral replica, a ghostly outline of the original. Thought experiment. If an ancient civilization used high-strength ceramics or glass, fragments could become embedded in rock layers. Over time, those fragments might not be recognizable as technology, unless you knew exactly what to look for. The desert time capsules. In some deserts, the environment is so dry and stable that artifacts can remain intact for thousands of years. The Atacama Desert in Chile, for example, has preserved mummies, textiles, and wooden objects for millennia. If such conditions existed millions of years ago, perhaps in ancient superdeserts, they could have preserved technology far beyond the lifespan of most artifacts. However, over tens of millions of years, shifting climates could bury even desert-preserved artifacts under new sediments. This means the traces could now be meters or even kilometers underground. Glacial preservation ice is another powerful preserver. The body of Tsi the Iceman, over 5,000 years old, was found almost perfectly intact in the Alps. On much larger timescales, glaciers could encase and protect objects. The challenge is that ice sheets advance and retreat, grinding whatever is beneath them. Still, in certain stable ice caps, preservation is possible. If ancient civilizations arose before the last several ice ages, It's conceivable that artifacts could have been trapped, buried, and only now be emerging as glaciers melt. Clues from known anomalies. Every now and then, scientists or explorers stumble on something unusual in these hidden zones. The Baltic Sea anomaly, a sonar image of a large, oddly shaped object on the sea floor, resembling a giant disk. Most likely a natural formation, but it sparked debate about sunken technology. Ancient mining tunnels in South Africa that date back tens of thousands of years, far older than expected for such activity. Mainstream archaeology attributes them to early Homo sapiens, but the precision of some cuts has fueled speculation. Technological DNA in the soil. One of the most intriguing possibilities is that technology could leave behind chemical or isotopic traces, even if the physical artifact is gone. For example, rare synthetic isotopes from nuclear reactions could remain detectable for millions of years. Industrial pollutants, like certain heavy metals, could form unusual patterns in rock strata. If found in layers much older than humanity, these could point to something extraordinary. The difficulty of distinguishing natural from artificial. One of the biggest challenges in this search is that nature can mimic technology surprisingly well. Volcanic glass can look like manufactured glass. Crystal formations can resemble engineered shapes. Sedimentary patterns can mimic masonry. Without clear context, even genuine ancient technology could be dismissed as a geological oddity. This might have already happened without us realizing it. The last stand of ancient technology. If a pre-human civilization existed, the very last traces of its technology might be buried deep in subduction-resistant crust, encased in minerals after fossilization, resting at the bottom of stable, oxygen-poor deep-sea basins. These are the places that change the slowest, and where the clock of erosion and decay ticks the faintest. Which brings us to the question we can't avoid. If such traces are out there, if the proof of an ancient civilization lies beneath our feet or under our oceans, how could we actually find it? And just as important, what would happen if we did? Subscribe for more.